أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره مغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاء المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم وإن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بالضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا سيئة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كما أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا منذرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات تجري من تحتها وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشاء نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولهم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله ما هو إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا سيئة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا سيئة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا منذرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قول من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تأكلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مزيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمر نكسه في الخلق أفلا يأكلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوب ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرا وهم لهم جند مهزرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم والذي جعل لكم من الشجر أخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم فاتحة
محمد وآل محمد صلوات قبر ज़हरा बना रहे हैं अली قبر ज़हरा बना रहे हैं अली अपनी गुर्बत छुपा रहे हैं अली क्यों कमर झुके गई है मौला की کیوں کمر جھک گئی ہے مولا کی، کس کی میت اٹھا رہے ہیں علی، اپنی غربت چھپا رہے ہیں علی۔ وقت تلقین زخمی شانوں کو، وقت تلقین زخمی شانوں کو، دھیرے دھیرے ہلا رہے ہیں علی، اپنی غربت چھپا رہے ہیں علی۔ اپنی گردن پہ نیل رسی کا، اپنی گردن پہ نیل رسی کا، بیٹیوں سے چھپا رہے ہیں علی، اپنی غربت چھپا رہے ہیں علی۔ رات ہوگی تو دیں گے غسل و کفن، رات ہوگی تو دیں گے غسل و کفن، آسماں دے کے جا رہے ہیں علی، اپنی غربت چھپا رہے ہیں علی۔ دیتے جاتے ہیں غسل بی بی کو، دیتے جاتے ہیں غسل بی بی کو، ہچکیاں لیتے جا رہے ہیں علی، اپنی غربت چھپا رہے ہیں علی، قبر زہرا بنا رہے ہیں علی، اپنی غربت چھپا رہے ہیں علی۔ محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen as well as all other marhumin. Surah Al-Fatiha. Dua Shafa'i Maries is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarri iza da'ahu yakshifu su. Amman yujibul mustarri iza da'ahu yakshifu su. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. Let us come together in honor of our beloved Bibi Fatema this ayam. This time we do it by learning more about Our Lady of Light. The events team has organized a quiz on Bibi Fatema's life. Take the challenge, do the quiz and win a prize. The quiz is $5 and all proceeds will go to Project Orange. The quiz will be on sale from December 8th to December 27th. You will have to submit it by December 27th. Let us now invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to please come forward and recite tonight's Majalis. By Muhammadul Muhammad Salawat.
يرحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once someone had asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, why is it that Bibi Fatema was named Az-Zahra, meaning the light? And I'm paraphrasing the narration, but basically said that there is, Zahra means light or illumination, or something bright. And they say that when she's in her mihrab performing ibadah, there's a nur which illuminates and comes out from there, and it shines everything around it. One of the dimensions of Bibi Fatema alayhi salam that people examine in terms of her being a role model for everyone is her level of ibadah. And when you look at somebody's ibadah, there's a few different ways you can look at it. One is simply in terms of quantity, that a person's just reciting things all the time and they're performing different ibadat. And that's something you can put on a pedestal to some degree, that they're constantly in a state of ibadah. Another dimension is when you look at, obviously, the quality, meaning that when somebody's performing ibadah, they're in tears, they have ma'rifah of what they're doing and their understanding, they're praying for very specific things. So, there's different ways of looking at it. What I wanted to try to do tonight, inshallah, is, there's been various du'as that have been narrated that she used to be in the habit of reciting. There's a longer du'a that initially is narrated from the Prophet, but we also have narrations that Bibi Fatema alayha salam herself would recite it constantly as well. And I'm just taking a part of that because a specific part of it I think is interesting and it's a nice point for us to examine tonight. And this specific part, they say she took this out of this excerpt. She took out of a larger dua, a longer dua, and this is something she'd be in the habit of reciting constantly. So we look at this dua. Inshallah, if they can put it on the screen, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So I'll just go through this part first. So this dua says, hopefully you can read it on the screen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma aslih li dini alladhi huwa ismatu amri. do islah and restore my deen, which is a protection for my amr, my affairs. وَأَصْلِحْ لِي دُنْيَاي, and do islah of my dunya, التي فيها معاشي, which is where I have my livelihood, I live, this is where I reside temporarily. وَأَصْلِحْ لِي آخِرَتي, do islah, restore my akhirah, التي إليها معادي, the place where I will eventually return. وَاجْعَلِ الْحَيَاةَ زِيَادَةً لِي فِي كُلِّ خَيْرٍ, restore or make my life something for me which increases everything good. وَاجْعَلْ مَوْتَ رَاحَةً مِنْ كُلِّ شَرٍ, and make my death a resting place from everything evil. So this excerpt of the dua, the full dua, there's different places where it's been narrated. In compilation books, you'll find it in Bihar al-Anwar. The source where Allama Majlisi rahmatullah alayhi sources it from is a book called Falahus Sa'il, which is a book by Sayyid ibn Taus. And there's different versions, like I said. Mostly, the larger versions, there's two of them. One of them says that Rasulullah used to recite this after Fajr prayers. Another version says that the Prophet used to recite this after Asr prayers, right? So it's part of different ta'qibat. Some riwayat, which of course this was taught to the Bibi Fatema by Rasulullah, some say this specific excerpt of the longer dua, she would recite after Salatul Asr. So this is the ta'qibat of Asr for her. And the reason I wanted to focus on just this excerpt or just this part, besides the fact that it's been mentioned in certain books that she was in the habit of reciting it constantly, was that in these short 5 lines, it perhaps gives us a nice overview and can maybe give us a deeper analysis of some of the philosophy behind a strong and sincere dua. And if you look at just the simple parts of it, what is it addressing? It's talking about deen, dunya, akhirah, hayat, and maut, right? Deen, dunya, meaning deen, religion, or your way of life, this physical world, the afterlife, and then hayat and maut, life and death. Right? The 5 basic components that everybody needs to focus on. But there's specific parts of that we need to understand. And the interesting part, because obviously, I'm sure you've seen many lines like this in du'as for Sha'ban and Rajab and Ramadan. At first glance, it doesn't seem like it's anything special. Right? You're praying for good, I don't want evil, give me protection, do islah. Like, it doesn't seem like anything, magical, right, at first glance. But if we take maybe a larger look at it, maybe a deeper analysis, there might be some finer points that we may have initially neglected. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So firstly, just to point it out, so the verb that Bibi Fatema is using in the first 3 lines is islah, right? Aslih. Now, islah we've talked about many times before, so I don't want to go through that point again. Most of you're well aware that when islah is normally translated, it's translated as reform, right? Reformation, right? When we talk about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, islah fi ummati or ummat jaddi, that he's rising to reform the nation. Now this word, this translation, reform or reformation, I personally don't like it. I don't think it's very accurate. So I chose to use the word restore. I think that's more accurate. Islah comes from sulh. Sulh, which you would know, is used for the word like treaty. Sulh is the opposite of fasad. Fasad means chaos, corruption, things being in disbalance or out of balance. The opposite of fasad is then islah or sulh, to bring things back into balance. So the reason a peace treaty in times of war is called the sulh is because when war takes place, there's fasad fil ard, it's chaos. Allah doesn't want people to be fighting like this. So when a sulh takes place, the idea is this treaty is supposed to bring things back to normal, back to a state of peace and salam, and people won't be fighting amongst each other, right? To bring it back to harmony. So that's what islah is, trying to find this state of equilibrium or harmony, bring things back to the way they used to be, the right way they used to be. So that's why restoration makes more sense than reformation. Especially nowadays, Reformation in light of the Enlightenment has this progressive, liberal sort of connotation. That's why I don't like using that translation. So I don't want to go more into that. I just wanted to make sure that point was understood. That islah here is that I want to bring it back to the original form. That something along the way, my fitrah was pure, my deen was pure, my dunya was pure, my akhirah was pure. I messed it up somewhere along the way, and I have to do islah and get it back to the pure way that Allah has intended it. Now, over here, there's another point that I think is worth analysis too. Normally, when we offer dua, when we make dua or read lines of dua, usually there's just an asking or a requesting for something, and that's sort of it. Right? After sometimes, many du'as will, in the beginning lines, besides the salawat, besides using Allah's names and recognizing Allah, Allah, you are this, you are that, then normally when it comes to the part of Allah, give me, arzuqni or rizqna, give me rizq and this, or waj'alni, waj'alna, make me like this. And that's sort of it, right? It's asking for something and then next line of dua. Over here, what's interesting is that after at least these first three lines, when she says, do islah in my deen, islah in my dunya, and islah in my akhirah, after each of these concepts, deen, dunya, and akhirah, she does tawsif of them as well. She describes exactly what they are. Now, why would Bibi Fatema do something like that? Let's go a little bit deeper. If you can recite it, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The greater point perhaps might be that this is a secret in terms of how to pray with ma'rifah. We all want to make dua and pray with ma'rifah. Perhaps over here in these few lines, maybe there's a key over here. The larger point might be this, is that how you understand the subject of your dua, how your ma'rifah of that object or subject is, will change the way that you make your request. Will change the way you make your dua. Let me say that again. The way that you and I understand the environment or understand the subject or object of our dua will change the nature of our dua. So, over here she's obviously describing deen, dunya, and akhirah. With a specific type of understanding of these three things, then the way that she's making dua might be different than the way that you and I make dua. Let me give some examples. A lot of us, when we think about rizq, we've talked about this a few months back. Generally speaking, when people look for a'mal for rizq or pray for rizq, recite certain du'as meant to increase rizq, the main concept behind our minds is obviously money, right? It's finances. So in our mind, because in our head, rizq means money, it means finances, then obviously the way that we're going to pray for it is going to be, financially motivated. And we're going to expect also the return of that to also be financial. So if a person is looking for a new job and they're making this specific dua for rizq, they would expect to get that new job. Or if they're, up for review and hopefully want to get a promotion, then after they, do this specific a'mal for rizq, they would expect to see the result of, I get the promotion, right? I should get some more money, or I get that bonus, whatever. So a person's understanding of the concept of rizq, of Allah as Ar-Razik and Ar-Razaq, is going to change the way that they make dua, the things that they will make dua for, and then their expectation from the dua itself. The same way, right? The way over here that Sayyidah Fatema alayhi salam is speaking about deen and dunya and akhirah, the way that we would understand deen, dunya and akhirah, the way that we might make dua for it might be a lot different, because her ma'rifah obviously is going to differ. It's obviously the true ma'rifah and the real ma'rifah that you and I should have. Now, let me give some more examples so it's a bit clearer. They said that this one alim was sent to, some village. And, this village didn't have, fancy building or a center or masjid, anything like that. So he went there to go, give some speeches, to teach them a few things, to do some, general tabligh. So when he got there and he saw the status, they didn't really have anywhere inside that they could, have their programs. So they had this sort of like hut kind of area where, they had this shelter, or, they put these pillars up, they had like this kind of makeshift roof, and people would gather there, again, outside, and they would, have their programs over there. So they invited the alim, this Maulana, okay, just come over here, and we'll recite, and we'll have the program over here, you can give your speech and do whatever you want. So he's outside, and he begins offering his speech. In the middle of the speech, it starts to rain. A little bit of rain, and the shelving or the roofing that was on top, right? The ceiling that was there was metallic. So as, those raindrops were hitting, that pitter-patter, whatever, it was making these kind of, annoying sounds. And it was slowly drowning out this Maulana's speech. Initially, he tries to do the humble thing and says, whatever, I'll just drown it out, khair. But then the rain starts to intensify more and more and more. And it gets louder and louder and louder. And now the rain is so intense that, this alim is trying to, he's being humble, but he's also trying to raise the volume, his volume, so that people can hear him. And then, after a while, he's like, okay, he realizes that, Allah has sent me, I want to be a help to you. It's going to be very difficult if you can't hear me or understand me. So he starts making dua. He said, let's make dua together. Let's pray that this rain stops. So he makes dua, Allah, please stop this rain. And, the other people who are there, they also kind of, mumble along with his dua. And the rain intensifies even more. So now there's a little shot to his ego. He's like, hold on a sec, I'm doing this work for Allah. I'm trying to help these people out. And Allah, you're sending more rain down. And he's like, maybe these guys, these people, these awam, these lay people, these villagers, they're not making it properly. So he tries to teach them a little bit. Look, this is the style of dua. This is what you have to do to get it answered. Let's really try now, guys. Allah, please make this rain stop. He tries it more intensely. People kind of, murmur, mumble along. The rain gets even more intense. And he's just like, something's going on here. He's like, are you guys not praying properly? What's happening over here? And then one of them comes to the side. He says, Maulana, these people are praying, but they're praying against you. It's like, what are you talking about? He said, this village has been in a severe drought for months. All they've been praying for is rain. And now you came in here trying to make the rain go away. They've been praying that your dua is not accepted, and you've been praying for rain. He's like, okay, I get the point. So he says, Allah really understands the object and subject of somebody's dua. And the people who are asking, if they know what they're asking for, that's going to be accepted. Where this poor guy, he made this dua, and it's a good thing that his was not accepted. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If you don't understand the environment, you don't understand what you're asking for whom you're asking for, your dua might be, hazardous, it might be detrimental, it might be harmful. Right? We can't just ask for any random thing the way that you and I desire. Without proper ma'rifah, we could be asking for the wrong thing. And obviously, behind the scenes, Allah's like, I know you're asking for the wrong thing. That's why I'm not going to accept it. Don't worry. And there's various stages to dua, which inshallah maybe some other time we can go through that. So when a person's praying for something, and they're making this dua, they have to have some wisdom, some hikmah, some basira, some insight. They should understand whether there's feasibility to what they're asking for. For me, if I'm going to go home every day and Allah, for this community, please give them and serve them healthy food, you guys are going to be like, no, don't make this bad dua for us. We want the greasy, unhealthy, sugary food all the time. So I would never waste my time making a dua like that, because I know that you guys would never want that thing accepted, right? So now let's go back to this. The first line here, Bibi saying, Aslih li dini alladhi huwa ismatu amri. Do islah, restore my deen. What is deen? Deen is alladhi huwa ismatu amri. Deen is the isma for my affairs. It's that protective layer. It's what protects my issues and my affairs. What's perhaps going on over here is it's describing the relationship, the fundamental relationship between deen and how this informs our understanding of dunya and akhirah. Let me explain a bit more if you can recite it. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We all run into various issues in our lives, right? Whenever we come to an issue, when we're there, putting our heads together, brainstorming, critically thinking, trying to solve it, whether it's a social issue, political issue, financial issue, medical issue, psychological issue, whatever it is, where do we actually go to figure out what the solution is? What's the actual source? Where do we go? Most people, if we're going to be honest, it's going to be dunyawi sources. Right? For most issues that we deal with in our life, we're going to find and look towards individuals who either have nothing to do with religion whatsoever, or who have a very, very, let's say, accidental connection to the deen. Meaning, it's not what's informing their decision-making process. They're going to give you solutions, but it's not really going to be based on any sort of deep metaphysical, spiritual, religious ideas. It'll be based on their research, whatever they've understood, but nothing really deep behind it. Perhaps what's being said over here is this, is that deen needs to be the main source for every single type of solution that we go through. If Bibi Fatema is describing the deen as ismatu amri, that this will be the thing that protects every single one of the affairs that we have. What does that mean? That means that perhaps there might be some of us who look for the protection of our issues and affairs and problems somewhere else. Maybe not consciously, but maybe subconsciously we're doing that. Maybe we are looking to somebody or something else that's not connected to the deen. And it'll be clearer when we go to the second line. Because when we go to the line about dunya, she says, وَأَصْلِحْ لِي dunya, restore my dunya, الَّتِي فِيهَا مَعَاشِي, where I live here, my ma'ish is over here. Now what does that mean? You know, a lot of individuals, what they end up doing is jumping to the sort of dunyawi perspective prematurely. So the word that's used over here is ma'ashi, which comes from the word aish, right? Life. The deeper meaning behind aish or ish is the idea of development or progression. Meaning you have some certain set of skills and characteristics, and then you apply them to progress and develop. Or in other words, it's the practical way that you live your life, right? Your livelihood, how you get things done in life. So a lot of people, they jump right to this step. You know, a lot of times when they hear different speeches and different subjects, you know, people come and say, we don't hear enough practical pieces of advice. Or they say, you know, they tell this Maulana, the stuff was very nice and sounded, you know, really cool and abstract and theoretical, but there's no practical application for it. Like, I need to be, you know, I need some practical stuff in my hand. I need some action items, actionable items. What do I do with it? The theory stuff is not enough. I need to, you know, apply it. And yeah, sure, there's definitely, you know, there's truth to that. The problem is this, the practicality aspect is completely useless without the theory. And this is what most people miss out on. We end up jumping to this idea, I need action items. I need to do something. Okay, you have to understand, for every actionable item, for every idea, for every advice you're given, no matter who you're getting it from, whether a religious person, a scholar, or otherwise, that advice they're giving you, that order or commandment that they're giving you, is coming from some sort of ideology. It's coming from some theory that they have, and it's an outlook that they've developed. That outlook is informing the way that they're, you know, putting these decisions together. So the way that Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, marhum rahmatullah alayh, the way that he describes these two ideas is, one thing is known as Jahan Bini, your worldview, the way that you see reality, and then once you get that, then you apply it to the world, and this is called ideology. You take your worldview, and then you have some actionable items afterwards. And this happens to everybody. Whether you're an atheist, agnostic, you're a religious person, whatever you are, you first have a system, you have this theory about what's going on in the world. From there, then you start acting. And that happens everywhere. You know, think about it. You and I right now, most of you are imagining that you are awake. But you don't think that you're asleep in some dream. You might think this is a nightmare, sitting listening to this lecture, but khair. You're sitting here and you're listening to a speech, you think that you're awake, so you're acting accordingly. However, if you know, let's say you're having a lucid dream, or you become aware that you're in a dream, you probably wouldn't, you know, sitting around in a room anymore. You know, when you have this phenomenon of lucid dreaming, you go out and you do random stuff, right? You run around. I don't know about you. You know, I fly, shoot lasers out of my eyes. You know, I do superhero stuff in my dreams. That's what I do. So you act according to the rules based on the reality you understand. Since you think that this is real, you're not going to go, you know, try to attempt to run through the walls, for example. If you think it's a dream, then you might do something like that. You might do something out of the ordinary. Over here, if your religion is Islam, if your ideology, or your worldview is Tawheed, Adal, Nubuwa, Imama, and Ma'ad and Qiyamah, you're supposed to act a certain way, based on those teachings. If you say, no, this life is, nonsense, we came from dirt or dust or non-existence, we're going to go into non-existence, like these, scientific atheists believe, then that's going to change their actions too. However rational or irrational it might be, that's going to inform the way that they act and the way that they think. So the way that we see reality is going to change the way that we act, right? It's very, very clear. So when some people say, give me some actionable items, okay, no problem, as long as you recognize there's going to be a theory behind that. Which brings us to the next point. When we come to, just like any other field, when we come to this idea known as ikhtilaf al-mabna or ikhtilaf al-nazar, ikhtilaf al-nazar, difference of opinion. Now let's explain that a little bit more. If you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Everybody is trying to do, to some degree, the best thing that they believe possible in their life. If you have some medical issue, you might do your own research online maybe, right, initially. Maybe you go to a family doctor you know or a friend that you trust, or whatever doctor is part of your insurance plan and part of the network, whatever, right? You take these beginning steps. Sometimes the information that you see or that you read or that you get, maybe it doesn't really sit well with you. Right? Maybe you go to one doctor and they say, look, in order to solve this issue, you have to take this medication. And maybe you're not somebody that's pro-pharmacological perspective. You don't like this whole pro-drug perspective. Say, okay, fine. So you keep researching and researching until you find a different answer. Or you find another doctor. And this doctor says, no, I can give you a natural way to deal with this, right? Or I can give you some herbal tea or something like that. You're like, that's the one I want to go with. A lot of times, and it's not just medical stuff, a lot of different issues, we end up having all of these differences of opinions and a plethora of perspectives in front of us. We don't see what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know what informs their decision and their framework. All we see are their results. So we take the results, you and I sift through them and say, which ones do I like, which ones do I not like? Which ones agree with me, which ones do I not agree with? So the ones I like, I'll keep that. The ones I don't like, I'm going to toss out. And this happens in every field. Right? If you go to a mechanic, you have a problem with your car, one of them says, look, this is going to be a $1,000 job to fix. You're like, I don't like that, obviously. You go to somebody else, they say, yeah, I can fix it for $20. Okay, fine, that sounds good. Because obviously you want to spend less, regardless of whichever one knows more. You might just think, whatever, the other one's trying to rip me off. You'll rationalize it. You'll say, the other one was a rip-off, this person is, helping me out. Well, this person that's doing it for $20 might be doing the shortcut, which is going to cost you more in the long term, but how do you know that? How would you know that? Which brings us now to this point. The reason why theory and application are very important is because in the way that we approach Islamic issues in this day and age. If you didn't see where I was going with this. This happens especially in the Islamic field, where, somebody will be asked a question, let's say, the same question that keeps getting asked on Slido every week, right, about music. And they don't like the answer, right? Somebody comes and says, no, all this music is haram, you can't do this, can't do that. Okay, fine. So they wait for, another speaker to come in Ayam Fatimiyya or Muharram or Ramadan, and they say, what's your take on music? Oh, well, in my view, then, this society, XYZ, it's okay. Interesting. So I'm going, they're all trained. They've all been to the Hawza or whatever the rationalization is. I think I'm going to go with this one. And then some people, they have this idea of fatwa shopping, which is a different issue about taqleed, which I don't want to touch on now. But the idea is a lot of us do that sort of shopping. Now, there are some points in some areas and issues where it's okay to do, and it's not a big deal. And sometimes it's necessary to do, especially when we know that there are going to be different levels of people who are studying, right? Sometimes you ask somebody who's only spent, maybe 1, 2, or a few years in their field or discipline, and sometimes you ask somebody who's an expert in their regard, and they've, written papers, and they're researchers, etc. Now, how you and I would come to know about that, that's a different discussion. But generally speaking, there's a hierarchy to all this. The question, or the point that we have to reflect on is this. If we are going to go around and, look for different answers, are we doing so in actual search of the truth and what is real and what's good? Or are we doing it to find out what is actually convenient for us? What's actually good for what my nafs wants, what I actually like and what I want? If this person is going to allow me to eat all that food in the restaurants that I want to go to, then obviously I want to stick with that person, right? This person's going out and making every restaurant haram, and they talk about hand cut and machine and stunning, and I don't want to deal with this person. Well, trust me, I don't want to deal with that person either, right? People who are a little too excessive with the food stuff, I don't want to deal with them either. All they do is come and talk about ingredients and this and that. No, I don't want to deal with that person either. But if we're going and shopping like this, the problem is this, is that we are unable to understand the framework that's going behind it. And what happens then sometimes is you and I don't recognize that, but sometimes you will end up clashing when you're grabbing two different opinions. The way that some people, they come to the conclusion. So let me give you an example that comes out in nutrition, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's a very famous way that most nutritionists will describe a healthy eating, habits and lifestyle, which is the famous, caloric deficit system or approach, which is that if you want to lose weight, you want to be healthy, just be in a caloric deficit, meaning your calories that you burn needs to be more than you actually take in, right? So as your days are coming and you're having so many thousands of calories, whatever, you need to burn more than that. If you burn more than that, then you're in that deficit, then you'll lose weight. For them, the type of food you have doesn't matter. So look, you can go and you want to have biryani every day, you want to eat fried food every day, you want to go fast food, doesn't matter. As long as you're in that deficit, caloric deficit, eat whatever you want, who cares? As long as you get, even some, you don't even have to do that much exercise. A little bit, and that'll be fine for you. So that's one approach. Others have a different approach. They say, no, the type of food you have, whether you're in a surplus or a deficit in terms of your calories, it's going to make, it's going to make a big deal. If I'm just, having fried foods all day, let's say there's no proteins and whatever, that's going to have an effect, right? The macros and micros, these things matter. Or the types of ingredients that are used, right? So there's inflammatory ingredients, there's ingredients that'll spike insulin, all these types of things, right? So it's more of a different type of model. So there's like an insulin carb model, etc. So these are two completely different approaches. Usually the ones who are more pro caloric deficit model, they're a bit more, let's say, research or experimental based, meaning we've got a bunch of studies that show it doesn't matter what you eat, as long as you're in a deficit, then you'll lose weight, you'll be in good shape, etc. Others take what they call a mechanistic or a theoretical standpoint. They say, look, this is what these certain inflammatory oils do to your body. This is what sugar does to your body. This is what XYZ does to your body. So these results that the other people are seeing in their studies, they're missing some variables here. There's something else that they're not accounting for. We know the theory of how XYZ affects the body. This is going to damage you, pretty much no matter what. So there's two different approaches. Now what happens is sometimes people, they grab, one thing over here, they say, oh, I can eat whatever fried foods and whatever desserts I want from this person. To somebody else, they say, oh, look at all these, this individual saying to keep away from XYZ. So they mix and match all this stuff without knowing that they're taking two completely different perspectives, and they start making this, literally a buffet of random stuff. And because they've taken two opposing methodologies, they're actually going to be harming themselves more than anybody else. If they had just stuck to one method, they probably would have been better off. But instead, they mix two methods, which usually is detrimental. That's why, in the medical field or any other field, they say, look, when you find somebody, you need to stick with them, because they have a whole process and plan in mind. For, ulama, especially when, have a spiritual teacher, like usually in Qom, Najaf, etc. Usually people, they have one specific teacher that they end up going to, and they get their akhlaqi advice. That alim or that arif, that spiritual ustad akhlaq, they know a person's spiritual characteristics, they know their daily life, so they give them specific prescriptions. They'll tell them, look, you need to do this ibadat, or you need to cut out this ibadah, and it could be various different things. You need to eat this food, you need to not eat this food, do this ziyarah, don't do this ziyarah. And that's the way they can do that, because they're like spiritual personal trainers to them. So they're able to fine-tune all these ideas. What we end up doing is kind of the same thing. That's why a lot of times people will forward me videos and different ideas from different scholars and say, look, here, comment on this, give me this idea. I said, look, hold on. I understand, maybe, I'll give the benefit of the doubt that you're looking for the truth. Okay, fine. At the back of it, you have to understand that every single speaker and scholar, they have their own approach to how they understand the Islamic perspective. There's no single Islamic perspective right now. Even among the Hawza, the Maraji, that's why there's multiple Maraji. There's different perspectives in Hadith, in Rijal, in Diraya, in all these sciences. That's what leads to these different conclusions. In terms of how to perform ibadat, there are different approaches for that. In terms of, what things need to be prioritized in the West, you ask different scholars, they're going to mention different things. Right? So you're not going to get the same answer every single place you go, which is why when people come, they say, I'm very confused, that I'm getting different answers everywhere. Like, well, that's going to happen no matter what, person you ask. Just like if you ask multiple doctors, you're probably going to get multiple answers. You ask multiple psychologists, you'll get multiple answers. You go to multiple mechanics, you might get multiple answers. There's a few things which are fairly certain, a few things, but there's a lot of gray area in Islam. And that's the beauty of it, right? That we're not stuck down in, one or two methods. But the advice that most ulama give is that once you've found a trustworthy teacher or guide or alim, stick with that methodology, because there's all these preliminaries, muqaddamat, and things that you don't know that are behind the scenes that are leading up to certain decisions. And if you come and kind of mess with that process along the way, you don't know what sort of damage you might be doing. Of grabbing, this spiritual medication, this a'ma, this, and you're putting it all together. This is usually not something that's advised. We look in the books of the ulama, they say, this is not something that's good. This is one of the major issues we have when there's so many things out there. All these translations and all these videos and all these scholars. At face value, it seems great. But the problem is that there's so much choice available, but nobody's ever taught us what is the barometer to figure out which one of these is maybe more accurate or more important or more pertinent for my daily life where I'm living. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And that's why these last two lines are important too. وَجَعَلْ حَيَاةَ زِيَادَةً لِي فِي كُلِّ خَيْرٍ. Make my life one where it's increasing in everything that's good. You know, a lot of us, when we make our dua, when we're praying for things, when we're asking questions, it's very personal. Like, I need to do what's good for me. You know, self-care. I don't care about anybody else. You're forgetting that you and I are just pawns of a larger game too. Sometimes the khair that we have to think about is not just khair for me and, you know, me and my spouse or my family and I and whatever, or even my community. No, sometimes there's a big, larger picture that we have to think about. You know, maybe some of you don't want Morocco to win. I don't know. But maybe there's, you know, something greater at stake here, and maybe that's why Allah wants Morocco to proceed and go. I don't know. I don't really care. This is what I see on the news. Everybody's going crazy. I'm seeing du'as, special du'as being made, special a'ma being recited for, you know, these countries. You know, again, this is how people inform their du'as. When somebody cares and makes the dunya just about these sort of, you know, lahu and la'ib and things like that, then their du'as are going to be focused on things like that. So when we're talking about khair and goodness is something relegated and just, you know, restricted to what I can understand and what I can see. When you take a greater look at what's going on in the world or in the cosmos, then we'll start to see, look, there are certain things which are necessary. A, B, C have to fall into place. These certain dominoes have to go, which may not seem good for me right now, but may cause khair for the larger perspective and picture, as we talked about a few Thursdays ago. That khair, that's the only thing that emanates from Allah. Only good can come from Allah. So when we do our duty, when we pray for it the way that we should be praying and what we should be praying for, when we do what we have to do and we see certain results, a part of us should understand that, look, maybe this is the way that it needs to happen. Or maybe there's some part of it that I'm not doing. Maybe my duty is not complete yet, and there's something else that I have to fill in the gap. And the final line, which I won't be able to explain, but just to quickly mention it, وَجَعَلِ الْمَوْتَ رَاحَةً مِنْ كُلِّ شَرٍ. Make my death a resting place, a place of leisure, and ease from every shar. If this place is easygoing for you, and you're like, yeah, dunya is not so bad, then your ideology about the dunya is messed up. A mu'min, as we mentioned last time, this is sijnul lil mu'min. This is a prison for a mu'min. Every mu'min should feel some bit of agitation here, that this is not where I'm staying, I don't want to be here. I have to live, I have to grow, I have to develop and build my akhirah, but I should never be settled and okay with the way I am over here. Death is something I'm looking forward to. I'm looking to be, thank God for death. Not the other way around, like, oh man, I need to live. I dread the day that I die. If it's that way, then definitely that's telling us about the way that we're approaching life. And death may be reversed. Inshallah, we'll end here. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So just as a summary, we were talking about Bibi Fatema alayhi salam as a role model for ibadah. We saw in this dua, besides the very simple things you can see at face value from this short dua, perhaps she was showing us that when we're asking for something, when we're praying, that you need to have ma'rifah. Ma'rifah in the sense in deen, dunya, and akhirah. Meaning deen needs to be the source for every single decision that you and I have to make. It should be the source for everything. And to do that, we have to be able to understand what we are praying for, how that's going to change the things around us. And we have to really think, am I praying for the right thing or the wrong thing? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Someone once passed by Bibi Fatema alayhi salam and asked her, this was after the passing of Rasulullah, and they asked her, how do you spend your nights? What do you do? And she answered and she said, I spend my nights with my back bent over, hunched over, on the floor, crying, wailing, thinking about the dhulm that has been done to this ummah. She said, I cry out of huzn and grief for the loss of my Nabi, of my Rasul, and I cry out of grief and pity of this ummah for what they've done to my wali and my imam. She doesn't say that I'm crying because I lost my father and my husband has been treated like this. She says, no, my Nabi has left, my Wali and my Imam are not being obeyed, and this is how the Ummah has treated her. This is how I spend my nights, in grief and in depression because of what's going on with the Ummah. How difficult were these few, very short weeks or months that Bibi had to go through. We know in the famous narration that when she's with Rasulullah in his final moments, as she wants to now spend her final moments there in peace, just the family being there, that the knock constantly comes on the door, and she tells this companion, please leave us now, it's time for our family to be together, this is a private moment. The Sahaba had their chance to say goodbye, now leave us. But constantly a knock is coming, and they say that Rasulullah was in and out of consciousness. And when he awakens once, comes back into consciousness, and he looks up and he sees his daughter Fatema shedding tears and crying and anxious, he says, Ya Bunayya, oh my daughter, why are you crying like this? What has agitated you like this? He says, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Abata, don't you know, there's been people who have been knocking constantly. I've been requesting them very kindly to leave us alone and leave us be, but they don't stop. They will not heed my request. And she said, Ya Bunayya, don't you know, this person who's knocking is not somebody who normally knocks. This is Malakul Maut who's come to take ijazat, who's come over here to take my soul back to Allah. And do you know, Malakul Maut does not come and knock on anybody's door. Malakul Maut is sent by Allah to take the souls without permission. But because of the izzat, because of the status and maqam and daraja that you have, he is knocking on the door seeking permission before he comes in. Bibi, in just a little while after Rasulullah passes, when they come to your door, when they become knocking, what will they be saying? Will they be giving their salams? Will the angels come to you, or will these mal'oon come to you? Will they come with light and nur, or will they come with sticks on fire? Will they come giving you good news, or will they come saying that we will burn this house down? They say that we will take away and they will destroy and they will kill your unborn child. They will take your husband and drag him through the streets with his hands tied. Bibi, this is what you'll have to go through. Ala la'natullah ala qawmi al-zalimin wa saya'lamu alladhina zalamu ayyu munqalibin yanqalibun inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Fatema Zahra, 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 Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, E meri Bibi, E meri Bibi, tere dar पे इस्तिग़ासा है तेरा ममनून मेरी शहज़ादी ये जहाँ सारा है या ज़ाहरा या ज़ाहरा या ज़ाहरा या ज़ाहरा तू हमें हिफ्ज़ और अमा दे दे अपनी चादर का साहिबा दे दे तेरी कुदरत में क्या नहीं बीबी तुझसे चाहे दो जहां दे दे या ज़ाहरा या ज़ाहरा या ज़ाहरा या ज़ाहरा بی بی اے میری بی بی آنسوؤں میں دعا مانگی ہے تیری تسبیح پر کے دل نے تجھے پکارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا تیرا دربار وہ سخی در ہے ہر فرشتہ جہاں گداگر ہے تیرے مکروز آسماں والے تیرا مکروز ہر سکندر ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی تو سخی ہے میرے بچے بھی ایک راہب نہیں گواہی میں جگ یہ سارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا فرش مجلس پہ اور مصلی پر ہر جواں کہہ رہا ہے رو رو کر ہم رہے نہ رہے مگر بی بی تا قیامت رہے غم سرور یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی خلد میں شہید جب جائے تیری آواز آئے آنے دو یہ ہمارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا مجلس غم میں اشک برسانے آ سکے یا نہیں خدا جانے کیا بھروسہ ہماری سانسوں کا اب کہاں ہم کہاں عزا خانے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی اشک غم تیری امانت ہے تیری اولاد کے ہی غم میں ہمیں سوارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا تجھ کو امت نے یوں ستایا ہے مرگ محسن پہ بھی رلایا ہے تجھ کو بابا کے بعد امت نے آئے دربار میں بلایا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا فاتحہ صلوات
Brothers and sisters, just want to remind everyone that we will be having a special health session talk with Dr. Faisal Tawab at 8:50 tomorrow after Majalis, followed by a Q&A. Ladies can text the number that will be on the screen. We will also have AMCC on site to do basic health check. Ziyarat.
Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alaikum ya Fatema al-Zahra, Sayyidati Nisa'il Alameen. Assalamu alaikum ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu alaikum ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifinaik wa anakhat birahlik alaykum minni jami'an salamullahi abadan ma baqit wa baqiya al-layl wa an-nahar wa la ja'alahu Allahu al-akhir al-ahd minni li ziyaratikum. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أخيك العباس وأختك زينب جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.